Now, getting ready to write HTML. When it comes to writing HTML, what you use to write HTML is a simple text editor. And the good thing about it is your computer, if you have a Mac-based computer or a Windows-based computer, you already have a text editor that comes, a program with a text editor in it that comes on your computer already for free. So if you have a Mac computer, it's called TextEdit. You'll be able to find TextEdit on your computer. And if you have a Windows-based computer, it's called Notepad. And that's all you need to start to begin write HTML is a text editor. And as I mentioned, they come standard on any Mac-based or Windows-based computer. They come already on that computer for free. That's all you need to get started in terms of writing HTML, as well as in terms of building a website. You really just need a simple text editor to do that. And to get started, it's already on your computer. And before we get anything else, let's talk a little bit about syntax. Now, syntax is important when it comes to any language or any programming language. There's a certain set of rules or phrases or things that you follow in order to communicate in any language. Well, programming languages are no different. As a matter of fact, it's even more important when it comes to programming languages because you really have to be very specific when it comes to a computer and being able to tell a computer exactly what you need it to do. So a computer needs to be given very specific instructions. It's not like a dog or something, a person, a human being where you can just like do something or throw a stick or tell somebody to do something and they can figure it out on their own. Well, a computer needs to be given very specific instructions. And if you don't quite write it the right way, sometimes you might get an error message. And then all it is the computer saying is, hey, I didn't understand what you meant by what you wrote, and you have to fix it in a way that the computer can understand it. So for HTML, there's something called tags and elements. And these tags and elements have opening and closing parts of them, as you can see. So an element is made of an opening and a closing tag, and the content goes right in between there. So we'll talk about that more in just a minute. But before we get further, let's talk a little bit about the structure of an HTML document. Now, when you write an HTML document, the structure of that document begins with this doc type HTML declaration. You declare at the top of it, at the beginning of your file, that this is an HTML file. And what you're doing is you're telling the browser that this is a file that I want you to use the most current standards of HTML, the most current version of HTML in order to show my website on the computer screen. So you're declaring that up front that you're using the latest version of HTML. Then you have this element, this HTML element, and it comes with an opening and a closing part. That begins your document right after the doc type declaration. You have an HTML element that begins the document. Then you have a head element. And this head element contains things that are typically not seen on the screen. So you have an opening part and a closing part. And in between there, you have things like the title for the website that shows up at the very top of the window, which we'll see in a minute. You also have links to like your style sheets or description. A number of things are contained in this head information, metadata, that you don't see, that's kind of behind the scenes, under the hood, so you speak, of the website itself. So here's where you put all that information. And then you have a body section. And the body section is where you're going to do most of your work. That's where everything that you see on a website is shown, is contained. So the images, the paragraphs, if you have artwork, videos, you put that within the body element. And that obviously has a lot of content in it. And that's where you're going to do most of your work when it comes to your website. And then you end your document. You end it with this closing tag for this HTML element that closes the document right here. And that tells the browser that this is the end of this document from an HTML perspective. So let's take a look. What we'll see now is that, how does this actually look and work? How do we use some of these elements? And we're going to write that in a couple of different ways. Now, there's a couple things to use. We talked a little bit about the paragraph element. That paragraph element follows the same style. We have an opening part of it. Then whatever you want to write in the between goes there, the words, and then the closing part of that element, and it'll show up right on the screen like that. You also have a heading. So there are different types of elements, and each element tells the browser a different thing, a different piece of information. And that's why it's important to be syntactically correct, because you actually have your browser reading what's on your file and rendering it in a certain way. Also, sometimes you have people who are using screen readers, and so they really may not be able to see your website, and they're following along because maybe they're visually impaired. They're following along with other technology. So it's important to be correct in how you're writing this on your HTML file. So you use a heading. And a heading just tells the computer, the browser, this is an important piece of information. So let's say right here that this is my first website. I use an H1 heading for that. You can set headings in very big font, if you will, big bold space, and they are headings just like you might see in a report, or you might see in a book, or a book report you might write. You have headings and then you have content that comes underneath. Well, H1, H2, H3, these are all headings all the way down to H6 that are within HTML that you can use, and they're different sizes from largest to smallest. And that's how you use it. So you have a heading elements from H1 to H6, and you have paragraph elements. And then you also have something called a title element. And that title element goes in the head section of your HTML file, and that tells you what the name of the website is. And we'll see that in just a minute in our exercise, but that title element goes in the head section, and that goes at the very top of the window, and it tells you what the name, a special name of that website might be. So it follows this pattern. Here you have your opening part, your opening tag, the content goes here, and then your closing title tag right here. And that's the same pattern you'll follow, the format you'll follow for almost any HTML element: an opening, a content, and then closing. There are some elements that don't have closing tags, which we'll talk about some of those as we go through this course, but for the majority, for the most part, this is what you do. Content goes here, and then your opening and closing tags go on this side. And we'll see more about that in just a minute. Now, what you need to write HTML is a simple text editor. Now, what we're going to do for this exercise is we're going to create a document called HTML, index.html, and we're going to put that in a folder. We're going to begin to write our first elements and to structure our first web page, if you will, by writing an HTML file. In order to do that, you need a text editor, and the text editor is very straightforward and simple. If you already have a Mac or a Windows computer, you have a text editor that came with your computer as a part of the software packages. If you're on a Windows-based computer, it's Notepad. You can access Notepad by going to Start, All Programs, then Accessories, and then to Notepad. And if you're on a Mac-based computer, it's TextEdit. You can go to Launchpad and then Other, and then access TextEdit that way. Now, one of the things about the text editors that come with your computer, they're pretty straightforward, and there may not be a whole lot of bells and whistles with them. This right here is a blank document, and it's an example of TextEdit. And I'm going to go ahead and paste in some information here. The structure, if you will, of an HTML document. Now, if you're going to do this, you have to type this in your own. I just went ahead and pasted it in because I already had it copied. But if you're going to use a text editor like this, you will have to write this in yourself. It could be a little bit tedious. So you're going to have to fill in all the information, but you can do anything you need to do with a web page by using this simple text editor. You don't have to buy or get another text editor that's expensive or one of the fancier ones. You can use what already comes on your computer in order to type it. It just might not have some of the functionality or some of the bells and whistles that some of the other ones will have.